Welcome, my friend. The storm rages outside, but here, in the quiet of this story, I invite you to find peace. Let the sound of the rain and the distant thunder guide you as you drift into a place of calm. This story is my gift to you, a gentle companion for a night of restful sleep. Relax, let go of the day, and let the story carry you into dreams. The rain had been coming down in sheets for hours, making the drive feel like a never-ending battle with the storm. I was pushing my rig down a long stretch of highway that seemed to go on forever, just me and the hum of the engine for company. I hadn't seen a single sign of civilization for miles, just endless trees and empty roads. My eyes were heavy, the kind of exhaustion that sneaks up on you after too many hours behind the wheel. I checked my fuel gauge and realized I was low. No big surprise. I hadn't seen a gas station in forever. The highway was desolate, and I had a feeling I wasn't going to find one anytime soon. And then, just as I was about to give up hope, I saw it, a small truck stop up ahead, barely visible in the pouring rain. It wasn't much to look at, just a rundown place with a flickering neon sign that read Rest Stop. But it was the only place for miles, and I needed a break. I pulled off the highway and parked my truck under the flickering lights of the stop. The place seemed oddly quiet, considering the storm outside. The lights inside were dim, casting long shadows across the parking lot, and there wasn't a single other vehicle in sight. I figured it was late, but still, no cars, no trucks. It was weird, but I wasn't in the mood to care. I just needed a hot cup of coffee and a quick rest. I walked inside, the door creaking loudly as I pushed it open. The air smelled musty, a mix of old coffee and stale air conditioning. The place was dim, the only light coming from a few overhead lamps that buzzed faintly. The walls were lined with shelves of snacks and drinks, but there was no sign of anyone working. No clerk behind the counter, no other customers. Hello? I called out, stepping further in. My boots squeaked on the floor, the only sound breaking the silence. A few seconds passed, and then from the back, a man appeared. He was tall, with a grizzled beard and tired eyes, wearing a dirty apron. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Can I help you?" he asked in a low voice, his tone flat. I nodded, trying to shake off the weird feeling crawling up my spine. "Yeah, just need to fill up on coffee, and maybe grab a bite. Been driving for hours." He didn't say anything, just nodded slowly, then turned to the coffee station at the back of the room. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about this place. The silence was oppressive, and the man's movements felt too slow, too deliberate. I walked over to the counter and poured myself a cup of coffee, glancing at the menu on the wall. It was outdated, the prices from another time. I took a sip of the coffee, and that's when I noticed it. A shadow moved across the window. I froze. It wasn't the rain. The shadow was too big, too solid. I looked over at the man behind the counter, but he was still working in the back, oblivious to what was happening outside. The shadow moved again, this time closer to the door. My heart started to race. Something wasn't right about this stop. I set the cup down, my hands shaking. The door was cracked slightly open, just enough for the storm's wind to rush in, but it also let me see outside. I took a deep breath and stepped toward the door. There, in the corner of the parking lot, I saw it, a figure, tall, dark, and it was standing perfectly still, just staring at the truck stop. I quickly backed away from the door, my pulse pounding in my ears. The figure didn't move, it just watched. I turned to the man behind the counter. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You got any idea who's out there?" But when I looked, he wasn't there anymore. The counter was empty. "Hello?" I called out again, my voice sounding too loud in the silence, but there was no answer. The silence in the truck stop seemed to stretch on for far too long. The storm outside continued to rage, the wind howling against the walls, but the absence of the man behind the counter left me feeling exposed. I glanced around, my eyes scanning the empty space, trying to make sense of it all. "Hello?" I called out again, my voice shaky this time, a little more urgent, but there was no reply. I stepped cautiously toward the back, where the man had disappeared, my boots tapping against the tile floor in the oppressive quiet. The coffee I had poured earlier was forgotten, cooling on the counter. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, something wrong. As I rounded the corner, the flickering overhead light cast strange shadows across the narrow hallway. It was dim, too dim, and the shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally, as if they had a life of their own. I hesitated at the threshold of the back room. The door to it was half open, the room beyond dark and empty. "Hey man, you back there?" I called, stepping inside. The air was thick, the scent of mildew and old wood heavy in the atmosphere. The back room was as strange as the rest of the place, dark, with shelves full of odd, outdated items. But what really caught my attention was the back door. It was wide open, swinging slowly in the wind. I could see the dim outline of the figure outside in the distance, still standing by my truck, unmoving. I rushed back to the front, my heart pounding in my chest. What the hell was going on here? Why was this man gone? And who or what was standing outside watching me? I went back to the front door, peeking cautiously through the blinds. There was still no sign of anyone else in the lot. It was just that figure. And the longer I stared, the more I felt the growing unease in the pit of my stomach. I tried to shake it off, but the feeling wouldn't leave me. My mind raced, every possible explanation running through my head, but none of them made sense. The figure, it wasn't moving, but there was something about its stillness that unnerved me more than anything else. It was like it was waiting for something. That's when I heard it, a soft scraping sound from behind me. I whipped around, my heart leaping in my chest, but there was nothing, just the empty rest stop. But the scraping sound came again, louder this time, followed by a low thud, like something heavy being dragged across the floor. I froze. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end as I slowly turned toward the source of the noise. The man, he was standing in the doorway, but something was wrong. His face, pale, hollow, and his eyes wide with a strange, unnatural gleam. His mouth hung open, but he didn't speak. He didn't move either. He just stood there, staring at me with that unsettling, knowing look in his eyes. I opened my mouth to speak, but my words caught in my throat. Something about him felt wrong. Something about this entire place felt wrong. Then, without a sound, he stepped forward, his movements slow, deliberate, as if every step was carefully calculated. His eyes never left mine. "Do you know where you are?" he asked, his voice soft, barely more than a whisper. I tried to back away, but I couldn't move. My feet felt like they were stuck to the floor. I stammered, trying to form words. "I don't know. This place, this stop, what's going on here?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he took another step closer, his eyes narrowing, as if he was studying me. "You can't leave," he said, his voice growing darker, more sinister. "No one who comes here leaves." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I wanted to run. I wanted to get out of there, but my body refused to move. The air felt thick, suffocating, and the storm outside seemed to be pressing in on me, amplifying the fear growing in my chest. And then, snap, the door slammed shut behind me. I spun around, heart racing, but no one was there. The lights flickered again, the shadows in the corner growing longer. The figure outside by my truck, still there. And now, the man wasn't alone. I could feel my breath coming in short gasps, panic creeping up on me. The air had become thick and stifling, like I was suffocating in this place. The truck stopped, the dim, run-down building, the silence that had swallowed it whole. Everything felt like it was closing in on me. And then there was him, the man standing in the doorway, still staring at me, as though he knew something I didn't. Something terrible. "You can't leave," he repeated, his voice colder, sharper. "No one ever leaves this place. Not once they've come." I took a step back, but the weight in the air felt like 1,000 pounds, forcing me to remain rooted to the spot. My mind raced. What did he mean? What was happening here? The whole situation felt like a bad dream, like I was trapped in some twisted reality. My head spun, and I felt my legs start to buckle beneath me. I tried to steady myself, shaking my head, as if to clear the fog. But the moment I looked up again, something had changed. The truck stop had become even more isolated. The walls felt like they were closing in on me, the corners of the room growing darker. And the storm, oh, the storm was still raging outside, but now it seemed to have a presence of its own. The wind howled, but it sounded more like whispers, like voices carried on the gusts, speaking in a language I couldn't understand. The man stepped forward again, his face still locked in that cold,
"You were always
knowing
meant to
stare.
be here,"
But
he
this
murmured,
time,
almost
there was
like he was
something
speaking
different
to
about
himself.
his expression.
"No
Something
one ever
sinister.
really leaves. You were brought here for a reason. You'll stay with us." I blinked, my heart hammering. "Stay with who?" I croaked. "Who are you?" His smile curled, a twisted, unnatural thing. "We are the ones who never leave. We're bound to this place just like you will be, just like everyone else who's ever passed through here." That's when I noticed him. In the shadows behind him, other figures had started to appear, shapes, humanoid but distorted, emerging from the darkness like they had been there the entire time, waiting. Their eyes were all dark, hollow, void of life. They stood silently, watching me. I turned back to the man, my voice shaking. "What do you want from me?" He stepped closer, his movements slow, deliberate, like a predator circling its prey. "It's not about what we want," he said softly, almost regretfully. "It's about what you want. The ones who come here, they stay." The shadowy figures behind him shifted slightly, as if they were waiting for his cue. Their eyes followed me, tracking my every movement. "I won't stay here," I shouted, my voice louder than I intended. But as soon as the words left my mouth, I regretted them. The air felt heavier. The silence that followed was so intense, it almost suffocated me. "You already have," the man said, his voice suddenly sharp, like a knife. His expression grew darker, and the shadows behind him seemed to stretch further, as if they were closing in on me. I took a step back, but my foot slipped on the slick, cracked floor. I fell, hitting the ground hard. My heart raced in my chest as I scrambled to my feet. But as I looked up, the figures were closer. They moved slowly, deliberately, closing the gap between us. There was no escape. I turned to run, but the door, the one I had been planning to escape through, slammed shut again, the sound echoing like a gunshot. "Let me out!" I screamed, pounding my fists against the door, but it didn't budge. The wind howled louder outside, but there was no relief, no sign of help. A voice spoke again, this time from behind me. "You're already part of this place," it said, a whisper that seemed to come from every corner of the room. "You can't leave. You'll never leave." I whipped around, but no one was there. The figures were closing in. The man was still standing in front of me, his face twisted in a grin that made my blood run cold. Suddenly everything went dark. The room, the truck stop, vanished in an instant, replaced by a sense of weightlessness. My feet no longer touched the ground, and I felt myself being pulled, drawn towards something, somewhere. The shadows reached out, their cold fingers wrapping around me, pulling me deeper into the abyss. But I couldn't stop myself. I was being dragged into the darkness, into the unknown. I could feel the figures around me, their presence pressing in from all sides, like they were guiding me towards something. Something I couldn't see, but could feel. And then I understood. I wasn't just trapped in this place. I had become part of it. The darkness enveloped me. But it wasn't just the absence of light that made my skin crawl. It was the feeling, the coldness that seeped deep into my bones, the sensation of being watched by 1,000 eyes. The truck stop, the figures, the storm, they all felt like pieces of a puzzle, and I was trapped in the center of it. I could hear the rain again, but it wasn't the same. It wasn't soothing anymore. It was sharp, like the sound of claws scraping against metal. My thoughts raced, trying to make sense of everything, but my mind felt as though it were splintering under the weight of it all. What was real? What was just my mind playing tricks on me? Was this some kind of dream? A nightmare? It doesn't feel like a dream. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to force the panic back, but every time I opened them, the shadows in the room seemed to grow. They pressed in on me, their coldness wrapping around my chest, making it harder to breathe. "You don't belong here," the man's voice whispered again. But now it was different. It wasn't just a statement. It was an accusation, a judgment. His voice was deeper, colder, like it was rooted in something ancient,
something that had been waiting for me. You can never leave, he repeated. And as his words sunk in, I felt the air get thicker, harder to push through. It was as if the entire room, the entire world had closed in on me, leaving me with no room to move, no room to think. I wasn't just trapped physically, I was trapped inside my own mind, haunted by these dark thoughts, these fears. The figures were getting closer, their eyes empty, but somehow more real. I couldn't look away, their gaze. It wasn't just following me, it was invading me. They were digging into my mind, into my memories, into the very things that made me who I was. I don't understand, I stammered, my voice cracking as I tried to make sense of it. What do you want from me? The man stepped forward, his grin widening. I told you, you're part of it now. You belong here, just like everyone else. This place doesn't let go. I shook my head. No, I'm not part of this. This isn't real. But the more I said it, the more it felt like it was. The walls of the truck stop seemed to close in tighter. The figures around me began to speak, their voices overlapping, a cacophony of whispers. They weren't just speaking to me, they were speaking inside my head, digging into my thoughts, bringing my deepest fears to the surface. I saw flashes, images from my past, my mistakes, my regrets. I saw myself, trapped in the cycle of my own mind, unable to escape the patterns I had created for myself. The voices twisted, each one a reflection of my own doubts, my own weaknesses. You thought you could escape, the voice said. But it wasn't just the man anymore. It was me. It was my own voice, echoing in my head. You never could. You were always going to end up here. I could feel my mind breaking under the weight of it. My heart raced as I struggled to understand. Why did this place feel so familiar? Why did I feel like I had always been here? Like I had been waiting for this moment? You wanted freedom, the voice continued. But freedom isn't what you think it is. It's an illusion. You've been running your whole life. And now you've finally stopped. The world around me seemed to spin. The truck stopped. The figures. The storm. They were all merging into one terrifying truth. It wasn't just the storm outside that had trapped me. It was my mind, my thoughts, my fear, my regrets. The things I had never confronted. The things I had buried deep inside. They had always been here, waiting for me to realize it. I wasn't trapped by the truck stop. I was trapped by myself. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. My eyes went wide, my body frozen in place. This was me, all of it. The fear, the shadows, the storm. It was all a reflection of my own mind. A prison I had built for myself and locked away. And then, as if in response to that thought, the man's smile faded. He stepped back, his figure becoming more indistinct, like a fading memory. You're free now, he whispered. The darkness around me shifted. The storm began to subside, the whispers fading away. The figures vanished, their presence no longer suffocating me. But I was still here, still standing in the truck stop, still trapped in my own mind. I stood there, the weight of the man's final words echoing in my mind. You're free now. But I didn't feel free. I didn't feel anything but the emptiness of the realization that I had been trapped within my own mind the entire time. My thoughts, my fears, my regrets, they had all led me here. This truck stop, the storm, the man, the figures, they weren't external. They were reflections of everything I had buried deep inside. The storm outside had finally begun to die down, the rain turning to a light drizzle. The air was still, and I could feel the oppressive silence hanging heavy around me. I looked around the truck stop again, but now it seemed different, less threatening. It was still run down, still empty, but the shadows no longer felt alive. The place no longer felt like a trap. I looked at my hands, the palms sweaty and cold. I could hear the faint hum of the truck's engine, but everything felt distant, as if I were no longer fully in control of my own body. My feet moved automatically, my mind still trying to make sense of everything that had just happened. I turned to the door and pushed it open. The world outside was still there. The rain had stopped, and the first rays of morning light were breaking through the clouds. But everything was quieter now, peaceful. As I stepped outside, I felt a strange weight lift from my chest. The truck stop, the figures, the storm. They were fading away, like a bad dream receding with the dawn. It was over. But was I really free? I walked toward the truck, unsure of where to go next. The world outside seemed vast, empty. And yet, it felt like a new beginning. Maybe I had been running my whole life, from my past, from my mistakes, from the fear of confronting the things I had buried. But now it was time to face them, time to move forward. I climbed into the truck, starting the engine. The dashboard lights flickered on, the truck humming to life under my hands. I glanced at the rearview mirror one last time, half expecting to see the figures, half expecting to see the man. But the mirror was empty. I drove off, leaving the truck stop behind. The road ahead was open, the storm clouds parting to reveal a clear sky. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt like I could breathe. I was free, but the road ahead was long. And I knew that true freedom came not from escaping places or running away from fears. It came from facing them, confronting them head on. I didn't know where the road would take me, but I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't running anymore.